Good to go.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Tech Academy's Tech Talk. Today, we're joined by Cory Althoff, author of The Self-Taught Programmer, and he's also a developer advocate at Vonage. He's going to be discussing his experience as a self-taught programmer, and he's also going to be presenting a workshop on APIs. So if you have any questions, make sure to feel free to leave those in the chat box, and we'll get to them. Thanks so much for being here, Cory. You can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for coming. So let me go ahead and see if I do in fact know how to share my screen. All right, can you all see my slides?
Yep, we can see them.
Awesome. Great. So welcome to an intro to APIs with Python. Thank you all so much for coming. Today, you are going to learn what an API is and how to use an API to build a web app with video streaming. So before we dive into that, I just want to quickly touch on my background. So in college, I tried to learn to program, but failed. And when I graduated from college with a major in political science, I struggled to get a job. And I felt like I didn't have the skills that employers were looking for. And so unable to find a job, I decided to try to learn to program. I was living in Silicon Valley, and I thought, why not give it a shot? So I bought all the books and courses. I think Python is the first book that I ever read on Python. You can see that to the right. And 6 months later, I got my first interview at a startup, and I was really excited, but unfortunately, I completely bombed the interview, and I just wasn't ready. But I went back to the drawing board, and eventually I did end up as a software engineer at eBay. And so after working at a few companies in Silicon Valley, I decided to write a book about my experience called The Self-Taught Programmer, The Definitive Guide to Programming Professionally. And to my disbelief, has now sold more than 150,000 copies worldwide. And I have a Udemy course with 160,000 students in it. So it's been really cool to build this self-taught community. I also created a Facebook group called Self-Taught Programmers that now has over 60,000 members. And that is a really wonderful community of people that all are either learning or learned how to program outside of just a traditional 4-year CS program. That's really what brings everyone together. So as I mentioned, what is self-taught? Well, I just distinguish it as anyone that didn't get a 4-year degree. So whether you go through a boot camp or you read books or take courses or whatever it is, that's what I consider the self-taught community to be. So a couple success stories. We have people like Victor, who went from a complete beginner to working with Python at a tech company, and Dragon, who got his first job as a programmer full-time without a degree. So really cool success stories coming out of my books and the community and this Facebook group that I built, and it's so cool to see that. And I love being involved in helping teach people how to program. So I recently released a new book called The Self-Taught Computer Scientist, and I'm now a developer advocate at Vonage. So it's a really great job because I get to build community among developers and give talks like this. So if you're not familiar with Vonage, it is an award-winning cloud communication provider that has a suite of APIs that help developers do things like send text messages, make phone calls, and do live video all programmatically. So what is an API? Well, an API stands for Application Programming Interface. And an API allows two programs to communicate. So you could write a program that uses Google's Maps API to get directions, or you could use Twitter's API to write a program that automatically sends tweets using their API. So it just allows two programs to communicate. So if you want to see an example of an API in action, you can use this API really quickly. So if you go into your browser and type in api.ageify./ and follow that pattern and just replace Cory with your name, then you can see an API in action. So what this API does is your web browser communicates with it, and it sends back a response, and it guesses your age based on your name. So I will give everyone just a little bit of time to try that out for themselves. And then let me know in the chat if it was accurate. So, all right, we got not accurate, off by 3 years, pretty accurate. Nice. So that's what an API is. A lot of times APIs return JSON, which is a way of communicating data between two different APIs, and in your browser, you're getting JSON back. And so that is a quick example of what an API is. So you see something like this if you haven't done it yet, and that is JSON. You see these key value pairs, and it returns the name, the age, and how many people have requested that name. Okay, so here is what we are going to build in this workshop. We are going to build a simple web app that lets you communicate with different people over video, very similar to what we're doing right now. You'll also be able to chat. And we're going to do that using Vonage's APIs. So a few use cases for this: you could use it to create a custom teaching solution for a classroom. You could make a custom experience for customer service. So there's a million different things that you could do with video chat on a website. And so a few things before we start. So you need to have Python installed to follow along. And so you can go to python.org/downloads if you don't have Python already installed. So go ahead and get that started now if you don't already have Python installed. But if you don't have it installed and you don't feel like you want to install it right now, that's fine. You can still get a lot of value just by listening. You don't necessarily have to type in the code yourself. I'm going to be writing some code and explaining what I'm doing and how everything works. So it's fine to just watch if you feel like that will be more helpful for you. So some other terminology: a Python library is Python code you can import into your software. Pip is a Python tool for downloading libraries. The command line is a user interface that lets you communicate with your operating system. A web development framework is a piece of software for building websites. An environment, shouldn't say all, an environment variable is a variable stored outside of your program, often for sensitive information like API keys. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We have to do some quick initial setup to get the Vonage Video API key and secret. You have to get your own key and secret. And so you have to first create a TalkBox account. So here's a URL. Go to that URL, and then you can sign up. It doesn't cost any money. You get $10 in free credits when you sign up. So go to talkbox.com/account/user/signup. And you should see a page that looks like this. So I'll give everyone some time to go ahead and navigate here and sign up. I'll take a look at if there's any questions. And if you have any questions right now, now would be a good time to post them in the chat, because I can answer any questions anyone has.
Someone did ask if they can use Jupyter Notebook.
Oh, yes. You definitely can. Okay, so moving on, once you sign up, then click on the left where it says projects, and then hit create new project. Okay, then hit create custom project. Okay, once you've done that, give your project a name and then hit create. And you should see something like this, and you can hit view project. And you should have an API key and an API secret, and you are going to need both of those things. So make sure to keep that. Is everyone following along? Is anyone stuck? Great. Let's take a look at our app. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and change stop presenting, and then I'm gonna share my entire screen. Sorry, I'm getting an error saying it can't share my screen. I had to just open system preferences, so just give me 1 sec. It seems that I've given it permission, so that's strange.
Are you using a Mac, Cory?
Yeah,
Yeah, it can be a little bit different on a Mac sometimes.
that's so weird. What was the URL for the API key again? Let me just put that into the chat.
That'd be great. So I know with the Windows machine, if you present and share the entire screen, that usually works, but I think it's a little different with the Mac.
Okay, let's see. Do you think because maybe there was a problem because I shared and then ended it and then started again. I'm gonna try to leave and come back and see if that helps.
Okay.
So I'll be back in 1 second.
Yeah, I'll let you right back in.
All right.
All right. So you may want to unmute your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, 1 second. I'm just trying to figure this out. Okay, system. This is what happens when you present live. There's always something like this. So
Technical difficulty, no worries.
Just 1 second, and I should have this work out. Okay, backup plan. This is why I always have 2 computers. I'm gonna switch to my other computer. I'll be right back.
Okay. Sorry, everyone, for the technical difficulties. We'll get it worked out here real quick. All right, so Cory, I'm going to make you a co-host again, so give me a moment. All right, so you should get the notification and you should be good to go.
Can everyone see my screen?
We can see it.
Awesome. That's why I always have two computers when I'm doing something like this, because it has saved the day many a time. Okay, so where were we? All right. What everyone needs to do now is go to the link that I'm about to post in the chat and then open up your terminal. So go ahead and open up your terminal. Actually, you know what? You don't even need to go to that link. Let me put it in the chat. Okay, but there's instructions there that can be helpful. So you can open that link, and then if you go to your terminal, and it would be a good idea to CD into your desktop. So CD desktop, that stands for change directory if you're not familiar with using the command line. So what you want to do is type in git clone and then paste that URL. That did not work for me because I already have it there. But what that should do is on your desktop, you should see Vonage unlocked. And this is a directory with everything you need to get this project to work. So I will type in the command git clone. Throw that into the chat so people can see how that works. Chat's not working. But anyways, git clone and then put github.com/cautoff/Vonage unlocked .git. And let me know if anyone is having any problems so far, but that should clone the repo onto your desktop. And then I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And if you go to that first URL, you should see a page that looks like this. And you'll be able to see all the instructions for what you need to do to get this project to work. And I'm going to go ahead and be going through all of this right now. So go ahead and CD into desktop, and then make sure to go into that repo, and then pip3 install virtual env. And then what we're doing is creating a virtual environment, virtual env, venv, and then source venv/bin/activate. And then you should see venv right here. So what we did was we went inside the repository that we cloned, and we created a virtual environment. And so in general, in Python, you don't want to install dependencies into the main interpreter, the main Python interpreter. You want to create a virtual environment so that all your dependencies are in virtual environments and they don't interfere with each other. So you should see a directory that says venv, and you created that when you did virtual env space venv, and then you did the command source venv/bin/activate. That's how you activate a virtual environment. And so if you cd into venv and then you cd into bin, you'll see that there is a script called activate that you were calling that activated your virtual environment. Okay, now make sure you're in the main part of the directory where you see requirements.txt, and then type in the command pip3 install -r requirements.txt. and then hit enter. And you should see something that looks like this. So what we're doing now is installing all of the requirements for our project. So the different libraries that our project relies on, like the Vonage video API, to work. So if you do the command cat requirements.txt, you'll see it's a list of requirements that our project depends on. And so we've now downloaded all of those. Okay, so there's one other piece of setup, and then we will be done with the setup portion of this workshop. So if you type in vim.env, that will open up a .env file, which is for your environment. So earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that you use environment variables to store information that's specific to your environment. So for example, API keys, or what operating system you're on, or what port you want your website to run on. You store those often in a .env file, or you store them in your actual operating system as environment variable. So what we're going to do is type in open talk underscore API, and then paste your API key in there. And then open talk underscore secret and paste your secret, the really long one, into there. And then hit escape, :x, and make sure when you do cat.env, you have that information there. Now, when you type Python app.py, you should see the website should work when you go to, let me get mine to work. So first of all, if anyone have any questions? All right, so for beginners, I recommend the Nano. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you can use any text editor that you want. But is everyone following along so far? Does anyone have any questions?
If anyone has questions, just go ahead and put it in the chat, and we will cover it.
Cool, awesome. So because I switched computers, I need to get my OpenTalk API key and secret. So let's see.
So it looks like Cody says that every command they type into their command prompt gets shot back with error cannot find module yaw list.
Huh. I'm not sure what to do about that. Try it. Let's see if we can Google that. Are you sure you're using Python and you're not using Node? So it looks like that's an error with Node. Are you using npm? And while you're working on that, let me set my project up. Normally, you always want to keep your API key and secret, so you don't want to do what I'm doing right now. However, I am going to be deleting this project, and so it's okay. Okay, so if you go to your local server now, 127.0.0.1:5000. Let me plug that into the chat. Okay, so if you go there, it should say please log in. And if you go to /admin, you should see a page that looks like this. You can type your name, click submit. And I'm going to mute myself. And then you can join like this. And you now have an app where you can video chat. Okay, so that is the app. And so I will go ahead and show you how this works. I'm going to show you a bit about the backend and how I built this in Python. So I'm going to check the comments really quick and see if there are any questions. Okay, so if there's no further questions, let's dive into how this works. All right, I'm going to create a new Python file called live.py. And the first thing is that I am coding inside of this directory. So if you're following along, create a new Python file inside of the repository that you cloned, and you can follow along with everything. But I'm using PyCharm because it's a lot easier to code live with PyCharm because it finishes, it has code completion, but you'll be coding. So let's get everyone set up in the terminal really quick. So this is the repo that we were working on earlier. And if I go ahead and open my .env file, right. So you can now see I have my API key and secret in there. And if I do Python app.py, then I can navigate to my local server and it's running that. The web app is running. So if you do Control-C, it kills the server. So if you don't have to use Vim, but however you want to create a new Python file, you can do Vim, whatever you want, and you can follow along right here. And then when you can type your code, exit, and then you can do Python test.py to run it. Your virtual environment is activated, and that code should work. So let me jump into PyCharm, and I will show you how this works. So the first thing that we're going to do is import Flask. So Flask is a web development framework, and it allows you to really quickly build websites. And I'm a big fan of Flask. And so from Flask, we're going to import Flask, render template, and request. Now, we'll just build a really quick hello world app to show how this works. So we can say app gets Flask, and we need to pass in name and static URL path. Not going to get into the details of how that works, but essentially what that does is it tells Flask to look in for static stuff like JavaScript files and CSS files in a directory called static. So app.run, app.run actually runs your server, and now we're going to put a decorator, and we're going to call app.route, and we're going to pass in the URL that this route controls, and then define a function. And so we're going to call this index, and we're going to say return hello world. All right, looks like we've got a question. Oh, never mind, that was someone entering. Okay, so if we run this, then our website, when you go to the home page, says hello world. And so with a web framework like Flask, essentially what you're doing is mapping a URL to a function that returns some HTML normally. So in this case, we use this special syntax to define a route. That means the home page of the website, if it's just slash, and it maps it to this function called index that we defined. So anytime someone goes to this route, Flask automatically calls this function and returns whatever the function returns. So if we then call this admin/admin and say hello admin, now setting this debug to true so we don't have to restart our server every time. But so if we go there again, and we go to admin, now it says hello admin. And for our demo, we have 3 routes. So let's go ahead and create 3 routes. So we're going to have the home page. And right now we'll return hello homepage, and then /admin, we'll say hello admin. We've got to change the name of the function. You can't name 2 functions the same name in Flask. And here we'll call this join, and we'll say. Okay, so now when we go to our web page, we go to the home page, it says hello homepage. We go to admin, hello admin, and if we go to join, is not found. Oh, I didn't update that. So that needs to say join. Okay, so now if you go to join, it says hello, join. Okay, so next we're going to config from decouple, we're going to import config. And so what this is going to allow us to do is import environment variables. So we're going to go ahead and grab the API key and secret. Okay, so what that does is it grabs the data from our environment file, so our .env file. And so one example of why it's important to have an environment file like this, say you were committing this to a public repository on GitHub. You really need to keep your API key and API secret a secret, because if it's public, anyone can use your API account and they could potentially charge you a ton of money. So you have to keep this data secret. And so that's why you want to store it in an environment variable that's not pushed to your repository for version control. Also, you don't want to integrate it into your code because different people have different environment variables specific to your environment. Okay, so if we print these variables, let's say we just run this. Okay, let's see, we've got an error. Let's see what's happening here. Oh, I put the wrong name, so update that really quick. Okay, so if we start our server again, you can see when we printed these two variables, it printed our API key and our API secret, which matches what is in this file. Okay, so if I'm going too fast, or if you aren't following along, or if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and continue. So render template lets us tell Flask to return an HTML file. So /admin, we're going to call render template, and we've got a templates folder with 3 HTML templates. And so we're going to pass in admin.html. And now, well, let's take a look at that really quick. So you can see admin.html, just a very small amount of HTML. And now when you go to /admin, it serves this HTML. And for /join, we're going to return render template. And we're going to put in join.html. Now, when you go to join, it's slightly different. It doesn't say what is your name, admin. It just says, what is your name? Cool. So 2 of our routes. So now we need to go ahead and use the Vonage video API. So it's a little confusing. Vonage purchased OpenTalk, and so it's called OpenTalk in the code, but at Vonage, we refer to it as the Vonage video API. We're in the middle of making that transition. So from OpenTalk, import client. So we are importing this OpenTalk library so that we can use live video via Vonage's video API. And so we are then going to create a variable called client, and that is going to receive our API key and our secret. Now we've got this client object that we can use to do different things. In this case, we are going to create a session ID. So the way that the Vonage Video API works is that every time you fire it up, there's a session, and different people can join a session. So you can stream and you can subscribe to a session, and each session has a unique ID. So we're going to call client.create session, and then we're going to grab that session ID. So this creates an OpenTalk/Vonage Video API session, which we're going to use in a minute. So what this admin HTML does is it sends a post request. If you're not familiar with posts, there's different HTTP requests in web development, post and get. And so a post request generally creates something in a database, and you can see right here that this is what is happening. We have a form, and it says method post, and we're sending this post request to our server, and it has the different information like the person's name, and our server will get that data. So we have to add a little bit of code that lets our server know that we accept post requests and get requests. And now we're going to say if request, so remember we imported request from Flask. So we're going to say if request method is post, then we're going to generate a token. So a token is basically your key to join an open talk session. So everyone that joins, they have to have a token that gets generated, and our server, in this case, is going to generate it. So we'll pass in the session ID that we created into generate token, and we're going to create a token. Then we're going to say admin is false. This is not a good way to authenticate, but just for the purpose of this demo, I'm doing a very insecure authentication method. So we're just going to say if admin in request.form, so basically in admin.html, there's that little hidden input that says admin. This is super insecure and don't actually do this in production, but it's just for demo purposes. So if admin in request.form, then admin is true. And then we'll say name, and we grab the name from that post request. So we say request.form, and we put in name, and then that grabs this input, which is the person's name, which again is this form, or this input in the form. So now all we have to do is return render template. We're going to pass in index.html, and then we pass in a bunch of variables. So if we look at index.html, it uses a couple variables: API key, session ID, token, name is admin. So we're going to go ahead and pass in data for all this. So we're going to say API key is our API key. We go to index.html, session ID is our session ID that we created. Token is token. Name the name is admin. Yes, admin. And that is all there is to it. We now render this index.html template, and if we run it, it works. Admin to start streaming. And there you have it. So I'll spend just a few minutes showing you how the API works on the front end. If you go to static and you go to admin video.js, we have this JavaScript file. And basically, our API on the front end creates a session, creates a publisher, passes in a token to session.connect, and then call session.on. And that is all there is to it. That is how APIs work. And that's how, with very, very little code, you can stream video. So I'm going to go ahead and leave time for any questions, and feel free to ask anything, whether it's about code or my experience learning how to program outside of school. But let me shut off my screen. I hope that was helpful for everyone, and maybe a few people were able to follow along, but I hope I gave you an idea of how APIs work, a little bit about web development, Python. So if there's any questions, let me know.
There was, I don't know if you can bring it up quickly, Cory, but there was, Brandon wanted to see the env file and what that looks like.
Oh yeah, sure. So this is what the .env file looks like. It's just a basic text file, and the way you declare environment variables is by naming it and then putting an equal sign and then the data. And then that creates that key value pair that you can then use in your code.
No, that's a really good presentation. If anybody does have any questions, definitely leave it in the chat. You can raise your hand and I'll open the mics as well if you want to do a verbal question. But that's a really good presentation, Cory. I do want to let our newer students know that you are going to learn all about this later in the program if you are just starting out. So you learn about environmental variables, you learn about virtual environments and you know, the frameworks like Flask and Django. But it is good to see it in action now for what you're going to be doing soon.
Yeah, and if you're new at programming, I certainly don't expect you to understand everything that's happening, but exactly. I've definitely found, when people are learning how to code, a lot of times they're like, how is this all going to fit together? And like, what do I actually do with this? Because it's not clear at first. So I find it helpful just to be able to show people like, oh, this is what you'll be able to do. And yeah, you certainly, if you're very new to coding, I'm sure that was hard to follow along with, but hopefully you got an idea of just sort of how development works, debugging and running the actual code and all that stuff. So someone said, can you please summarize what we learned in a few sentences? Yeah, that's a great question. Let me see. So what you just learned is that you can use other companies' APIs to do things that would take you an incredible amount of time if you coded it yourself in just a few lines of code. So the main takeaway here is that, like, if you were working on a project and your boss is like, you need to build this custom video website, you absolutely wouldn't want to just like sit down and be like, okay, I'm gonna write like a million lines of code, to try to make video work. You would say, what are APIs that exist that allow me to do this quickly and easily? And you can use Vonage or our competitors, and you'd be able to get that working in like half an hour instead of having to form a whole team to go out and build video streaming functionality. So that essentially exists for tons of different functionality that you will come across as a developer.
Well, and it also keeps the company's code proprietary. So they can, you don't get to see all the code they're using, and it keeps it private for them.
Absolutely. Let's see. Okay. Can you talk about how the API endpoints convert the video into the data stream? I'm familiar with get post and getting JSON back. What are we posting here? That is a good question. I'm trying to think. Can you talk about how the API endpoints convert? So yeah, that might be above my pay grade, kind of to explain exactly how the video API works. But let me see. Let me think about that in for a few minutes, and I'll come back to that. Do a lot of companies now make it easy for new developers to utilize their API tools? Yeah, I mean, many APIs are paid APIs. Actually, if you type in fun APIs, I wrote this article for Vonage that's like my most popular article that I've ever written, and it's a list of like 40 APIs that you can use, and they all are free. So there's some pretty cool ones. Like there's like a Pokemon API, which is funny, and there's all kinds of stuff. NASA has an API. Here, let me see if I can find it totally. Here is one. So yeah, you might find some cool APIs to play around with for different side projects. And yeah, that's something in my career that's been super helpful for me, is working on side projects. It's a great way to get noticed when you finish up your boot camp, you're ready to apply for jobs, and you have a portfolio of different fun projects that you've created, using different APIs. That's definitely something that when I was interviewing, I, for fun, built a web scraper that basically calculated where the best city would be to buy an Airbnb. So different fun side projects like that are super helpful for when you're interviewing for jobs. And I found that to be really a good thing to do. So let me see if I can go back to that other question. Because this is a little, the way the video API works is like a little different than just like, I guess it doesn't look exactly the same as a traditional API. But let me get, it's okay if I follow up after with the answer to that, because I don't want to give a bad answer, but that's a great question. I can really follow up afterwards.
Sounds good.
Cool. Any other questions?
No, that was really good, Cory. We do appreciate it. And yeah, we are really glad that we had somebody who is an author and someone who's, taught themselves. We've got a lot of people going through the boot camp, so they're new to programming. And I do definitely recommend your books. They are good for starting out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate you all hosting me and everyone for coming. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cory. I'll post a link to his book in the chat box if anybody is interested. And also, I put a link to his LinkedIn in there as well if you have any other questions.
All right, there was one more question. Is there a particular process in requesting APIs from companies? Yeah, so many companies, you can just sign up really quickly and easily. Like you just, what we did today, you just type in your email and password, and you can generally get an API key pretty quickly. So there's a ton of APIs that allow you to just instant register and you have access. What kind of topics in the CS book? So the CS book covers linked lists, so basically data structures and algorithms. So it goes into linked lists, trees, graphs, big O notation, most of the stuff that you would need to know for a technical interview. So it goes into the kind of core concepts that will really help you in a technical interview.
So you just kind of expanded the last chapter of your first book into a whole nother book.
Exactly, yeah, because that was the most common thing that people were asking. There, that they needed help with data structures and algorithms for these technical interviews, because there are definitely data structures and algorithms books out there, but they're so hard to understand. Like a lot of them are written in Java, and they're just like, they assume you have like a really advanced CS background, and I found them to be super hard to understand. So no, the books are not language agnostic. They're all in Python, which I feel like is essentially pseudocode. Like most people from other programming languages can read Python pretty easily. So that's why I chose that. I don't know if that's a fair statement. It's not really pseudocode, but it's very easy to read. So that's why I chose that.
So your next book will be Nailing the Technical Interview?
Maybe, yeah, maybe. I thought about doing something else on web development, so we'll see. There's so much work. Oh my goodness, it's a lot of work to write a book, and so we'll see if I have the energy to write one more.
Gotcha. Anything else to add, Lucy?
Yeah, we have another tech talk next week with Tech Academy graduate Lyman McBride. He's going to be talking about unit testing and clean code. So I'll provide some links to that. And then also, if you wanted to rewatch this tech talk, it's going to be in our playlist over the weekend. So I'll provide a link to that as well. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming. And thank you, Cory, again, for presenting.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right.
Good stuff, Cory. Thank you, and I will connect with you on LinkedIn.
Sounds great. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you again so much for coming, and best of luck in your journey learning how to code. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter if you ever have any questions or anything like that. It's Cory Althoff on Twitter, and yeah, happy to help if anyone has any questions with the coding or anything like that. So thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, Cory. All right, thanks everyone for coming out today, and do tune in for our next Tech Talk next Friday, same time, same place.